If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell and share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. I had been driving trucks for a good 15 years when it all started to change. 15 years of endless asphalt stretching out before me. 15 years of sleeping in cramped cabs, eating gas station food, and chasing deadlines across state lines. You get used to the loneliness after a while. You make peace with the road, with the monotony, with the way the sun burns your eyes during the day, and the way the cold creeps into your bones at night. But nothing prepared me for what I would encounter on those endless highways. It was late September when the first real strange thing happened. The kind of strange that sits in the back of your mind, gnawing at you like a rat in the dark. I had been hauling a load from Colorado to Oregon, a long, uneventful stretch through open country and dense pine forests. It should have been routine. It should have been just another job, another series of mile markers flashing past the windshield. But that night, somewhere along Highway 20, the road changed. The first thing I noticed was how the air seemed heavier, almost thick enough to taste. The second thing was the fog. Thick, low-lying fog crept out of the trees like fingers, curling across the asphalt. I slowed down, leaning forward in my seat, squinting into the mist. The headlights barely penetrated it, and it felt less like fog and more like smoke. Dense, swirling, alive. The radio crackled and went dead, which wasn't unusual in the middle of nowhere. Still, the sudden silence was suffocating. I tried switching stations, tapping the dash, even humming to myself just to fill the space, but nothing helped. It felt like I had driven into another world, one where the rules no longer applied. The miles dragged on. The GPS lost signal. The road signs became sparse, then non-existent. It was just me, the truck, and the fog, endlessly stretching out into the unknown. And then I saw her. At first, she was just a shadow in the distance, a small figure standing by the side of the road. I figured it was some stranded motorist, someone whose car had broken down, maybe someone needing help. Even in all the years I had been driving, I'd never just left someone stranded. It wasn't in my nature. I slowed the rig to a crawl, easing over to the shoulder. As I got closer, the figure came into sharper focus. She was wearing a pale dress that billowed around her ankles, though there was no wind. Her hair was long and dark, hanging over her face in tangled strands. She didn't move as I approached, didn't lift her head, didn't wave for help. Something about her made every instinct in me scream to keep driving, to floor the gas pedal and get as far away as possible. But I didn't listen. I pulled up beside her and rolled down the window. "You okay, ma'am?" I called out, my voice sounding hollow in the thick air. She didn't answer. She didn't even look up, just stood there staring at the ground. I leaned out a little farther, trying to get a better look, and that's when she moved, not slowly, not naturally, but like a puppet jerked on strings. Her head snapped up, revealing a pale, hollow face. Her eyes were sunken and empty, like black pits in her skull, and her mouth, God, her mouth stretched open in a wide, unnatural grin. I recoiled, my heart hammering in my chest. Before I could even react, she stepped forward, reaching for the truck. Her hands were wrong, too long, too thin, the fingers bending backward at impossible angles. I slammed the truck into gear and peeled away from the shoulder, the tires screaming against the wet asphalt. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if she was chasing me. I just drove. For miles after that, I didn't see another soul. No cars, no trucks, not even a deer crossing the road. It was like the world had emptied itself, leaving me alone in that thick, choking mist. The clock on the dashboard blinked erratically, flashing random times, sometimes freezing, sometimes racing forward too fast to follow. The temperature gauge swung wildly from hot to cold. The fuel gauge dropped and rose and dropped again, even though I had just filled up before sunset. None of it made sense. The world had gone wrong somehow, and I was trapped in it. The worst part was a small part of me, a deep, buried part, started to wonder if I had ever been on the road at all. Maybe I had died somewhere back in Colorado, and this was it, an endless purgatory made of fog and fear and loneliness. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time had no meaning anymore. Eventually, the fog began to thin, and I found myself pulling into a small rundown truck stop. Its neon lights flickered weakly, buzzing like dying insects. The parking lot was empty except for one other truck, an old Peterbilt that looked like it hadn't moved in years. Relieved, I parked the rig and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. I climbed down from the cab, my boots crunching on gravel, and headed toward the diner attached to the station. Maybe a cup of coffee, maybe some human contact. Anything to shake off the horror clinging to me. The door creaked open and a bell jingled overhead. Inside, the diner was bathed in sickly yellow light. The tables were all empty, except for one figure sitting at the counter, an old man hunched over a steaming cup of coffee. The waitress behind the counter didn't even glance up as I approached. I slid onto a stool and cleared my throat. "Coffee," I said, my voice raw and unfamiliar. The waitress nodded once, robotically, and poured me a cup from a pot that looked older than I was. I took a sip and immediately regretted it. The coffee was bitter, metallic, like it had been brewing for weeks. Still, it was something. I glanced at the old man beside me. His face was weathered, lined with deep creases, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a filthy trucker cap. He was muttering to himself, words too low and fast to make out. I listened closer, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He was repeating the same phrase over and over. "The road owns you now. The road owns you now. The road owns you now." I wanted to get up, to leave, but my body wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in that moment, as the lights flickered and the air grew colder. The old man turned to me then, slowly, his movements stiff and jerky. When I finally saw his face fully, my blood turned to ice. His eyes were gone, just empty black sockets that wept thick, dark fluid. His mouth twisted into a grin far too wide for his face. "You can't leave," he rasped. "You belong." To the road, the lights went out and the screaming began. I don't know how long the screaming went on. It started as one voice, the old man at the counter, but it grew, multiplied, until it sounded like 100, 1,000 voices shrieking from every corner of the diner. The walls shook, the floor vibrated beneath my boots. The windows rattled in their frames like they would shatter at any second. I clutched the counter, my knuckles white, trying to steady myself, trying to breathe, trying to think, but the air was too thick, too cold, too heavy with the stink of rot and metal. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was so absolute, it felt unnatural, like the world had been put on pause. I opened my eyes, I hadn't even realized I'd closed them, and found the diner empty. No old man, no waitress, no sound at all. Just the flickering fluorescent lights overhead, buzzing weakly, casting long, twitching shadows across the floor. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body screaming to get out, to run, to leave this place behind me. But when I turned toward the door, I saw it. The truck stop outside was gone. The Peterbilt, the gas pumps, the cracked asphalt, all of it had vanished. In its place was a dense, endless forest, trees black and twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The diner floated in a sea of darkness, surrounded by those hungry woods, and through the glass pressed up against the windows were faces, hundreds of them, men, women, children, all pale, all staring, all grinning that same awful, broken grin. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths stretched impossibly wide, their teeth too sharp. Too many, I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs. One of them, a woman with matted blonde hair and a torn red dress, lifted a hand and tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the diner like gunshots. I backed away further, feeling for the counter behind me, desperate for something solid to hold on to. The tapping grew louder, faster, more frantic. Dozens of hands now, slapping, clawing at the windows. Cracks spiderwebbed across the glass. It wouldn't hold for long. I had to move, had to find a way out. I bolted toward the kitchen, nearly tripping over a chair that seemed to shift under my feet as I passed. The kitchen. Door swung open with a loud, rusty creak, and I plunged through without thinking, slamming it shut behind me. The noise from the diner muted slightly, but I could still hear it. The frantic tapping, the screech of nails against glass, the low, hungry moaning. The kitchen was worse. The air here was colder, so cold my breath came out in thick white plumes. The stainless steel counters were coated in frost, the floor slick with ice. Pots and pans hung from the ceiling, swinging slowly back. And forth, though there was no breeze, the shadows were deeper here, darker, moving at the edges of my vision. Something brushed past my leg, something cold and wet. I jerked away, heart in my throat, but there was nothing there, just a smear of dark liquid on the floor where I'd been standing. It smelled sweet, cloying and like rotting fruit. I gagged, covering my mouth, and stumbled forward. There was a door at the back of the kitchen, an emergency exit maybe. If I could just get to it, get out into the woods, maybe I could find a road, a path, anything. Maybe I could find the truck again. Maybe I didn't let myself think about the faces, the hands, the endless stretch of black forest outside. I didn't let myself think at all, I just ran. The door was rusted, the handle frozen, but I threw my weight against it, and it gave with a shriek of protest. I tumbled out into the cold night air, hitting the ground hard. The dirt was damp and soft beneath me, sucking at my clothes, my boots. I scrambled to my feet, gasping, and looked around. The diner was gone. Behind me, there was only more forest, more darkness. Above, the sky was wrong, a deep, bruised purple with a swollen, sickly yellow moon hanging low and heavy among the twisted branches. The trees loomed on all sides, tall and black and ancient. There was no wind, no sound, not even the chirp of insects or the rustle of leaves, just silence, and then a low rumble. Faint, distant but unmistakable. An engine, a truck. Hope flared in my chest. I turned toward the sound, straining my ears. It was coming from deeper into the forest, through the trees. I didn't hesitate. I plunged into the woods, pushing through the grasping branches, ignoring the way they tore at my clothes and scratched my skin. The rumble grew louder, closer, more real. I broke into a run, branches whipping, against my face, my arms, my chest. The ground was uneven, treacherous, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had to reach it. Had to get out of here. The trees thinned slightly, opening into a small clearing, and there, sitting in the middle of the clearing under the sickly yellow moon, was a truck, not mine. An old battered rig, its cab rusted and dented, its trailer slumped to one side like a wounded animal. The engine idled low, a deep, wet growl that vibrated through the ground. The headlights were on, but the beams were wrong. Too bright, too sharp, casting long, twitching shadows that seemed to move on their own. I approached cautiously, my heart hammering. There was something about the truck that felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. Like it wasn't a machine, at all, but something wearing the shape of one. I reached the driver's side door and hesitated. The cab was dark. I couldn't see inside. I knocked on the window. No answer. I tried the handle. It swung open with a hiss of escaping air. Inside, the cab was freezing cold, the seats covered in a thin layer of frost. There was a smell, too. Not the familiar sense of diesel and sweat and stale coffee, but something sour, metallic. Blood. I climbed inside anyway, desperate, shivering, trying not to breathe too deeply. The keys were in the ignition. I turned them. The engine roared. To life, louder now, almost deafening. The dashboard lights flickered erratically, gauges spinning wildly. The radio crackled and a voice spilled out. Not music, not static, but a voice, low and ragged and broken. You shouldn't have stopped. I froze. The headlights flared, blinding, and through the glare, standing at the edge of the clearing, I saw them. The figures, the same ones from the diner, from the glass. Hundreds of them, surrounding the truck, staring with hollow eyes and broken. Grins closing in. I slammed my foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning in the soft earth, and then caught traction. I tore through the clearing, ploughing into the trees, branches snapping and scraping against the sides of the rig. The figures didn't chase. They didn't need to, because no matter how far I drove, no matter how many miles I put between me and that clearing, they were always there, in the mirrors, in the shadows at the edge of the road, watching, waiting, smiling. And I knew deep down that I would never be free of them. The road had claimed me, and the road never lets go. I drove without thinking, without stopping. The trees blurred past on either side, dark walls hemming me in. The road beneath the tires wasn't asphalt anymore. It was something softer, stranger. It felt like driving over packed earth, or something even more unnatural. Like flesh. I didn't want to look too closely. I didn't want to think too hard about it. The cab stank of rot and cold metal. The dashboard lights blinked and spasmed like they were dying, but I kept my hands on the wheel, white-knuckled, my foot pressed hard against the gas pedal. As long as I was moving, I told myself I was safe. As long as the wheels kept turning, they couldn't catch me. That lie held me together for a while, an hour, maybe two, maybe longer. Time didn't work the same way here. After a while, the road, if it could even be called that anymore, split. Two paths forked ahead of me, one veering sharply left into a tangle of denser woods, where the trees seemed to lean together like conspirators. The other sloping gently right, toward a low mist that writhed like living things across the ground. Neither option looked good. Neither option looked like salvation. But I had to choose. The truck growled under me, vibrating through the seat, my wheel twitching faintly in my hands, as if the vehicle itself wanted to decide for me. I took the right path into the mist. Immediately, the world changed. The fog swallowed everything. The trees vanished. The sky disappeared. It was just me and the mist, a thick, swirling mass that seemed to have a weight of its own. Visibility dropped to nothing. I leaned forward, squinting into the haze, my heart pounding. Shapes shifted and twisted in the fog. Hints of figures, impossible structures, glimmers of movement just beyond my reach. Sometimes I thought I saw headlights. Sometimes I thought I heard horns, distant and mournful, like the crying of whales in a deep black sea. And sometimes, worst of all, I thought I saw the figures walking alongside the truck, keeping pace, smiling, always smiling. Tried to tune them out, tried to focus only on the thin strip of road I could see in front of me, but the radio had other ideas. It came alive again without warning, a sudden, sharp burst of static that made me jump. Then the voice came through. Different. This time, not the old man from the diner, a woman's voice, soft, whispering. "Turn around," she said. "You don't belong here." I gritted my teeth, shook my head. I wasn't about to stop. Stopping was death. But the voice kept talking, growing louder, more urgent. "Turn around, turn around, turn around before it's too late." The steering wheel jerked violently in my hands. The truck veered sharply left, tires screeching against the unseen surface. I fought it, muscles straining, wrestling the rig back onto whatever passed for a road. The fog thinned just enough for me to see what lay ahead, and I understood why she was warning me. The road, if it had ever been real, simply ended. There was no gradual stop, no warning signs, no shoulders. It just dropped away into a yawning, endless black void. I slammed the brakes, the tires locked. The truck skidded, sliding sideways, momentum carrying me toward the edge faster than I could correct. For a moment, a terrible, frozen moment, the cab tipped forward. I felt the front wheels lift, felt gravity reach for me, and then somehow, by some miracle, the rig shuddered to a stop. Half of the cab hung over the void, suspended. The trailer groaned behind me, metal straining against metal. Slowly, painfully, I reversed, inch by inch, fighting every instinct to move fast. The truck finally settled back onto solid ground. I sat there for a long moment, breathing hard, sweating, feeling the chill of fear seeping into my bones. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, colder, amused. "You were warned." The fog swallowed the sound. The mist thickened again, and the figures emerged from it. They didn't run, they didn't lunge, they just walked, slowly, inevitably. Their faces were clearer now, each one a grotesque mockery of humanity, with features stretched and twisted as if by invisible hands, their hollow eyes fixed on me, their mouths moving in silent whispers. I threw the truck into gear and turned around. tires spinning as I fled back down the misty road. The truck rattled and shook, the frame groaning like it would tear itself apart. The fog pressed closer, heavier, almost physical, and through it all, I heard the sound. A laugh, deep and low and cruel. Not from the figures, not from the radio, from the truck itself, from deep within the engine, from the very bones of the machine. The truck was laughing at me. I drove for what felt like days. The mist eventually thinned, the trees returning, in strange distorted shapes like things seen through water. The road widened again, almost resembling a highway. Exit signs flickered in the distance, broken and unreadable. Gas stations, diners, motels, they appeared and disappeared at random, their lights flickering, their windows black and hollow. Once, I saw a familiar face at a gas station. Another driver I knew, Big Jim, from a job we ran together a few years back. He waved at me from the pump, his smile too wide, his eyes too empty. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I knew it wasn't really him. Nothing here was real. The rules I had lived by out on the real highways, rules about stopping for a stranded traveler, helping a fellow driver, respecting. The road, they didn't apply here. Here, kindness was a trap. Compassion was a death sentence. Here, the road owned you. Sometime later, I don't know how much later, I saw the sign. An old, weather-beaten billboard on the side of the road, half obscured by creeping vines. It read, "Welcome to Dead Man's Pass, last stop before forever." Below it, in smaller letters, "No turning back." My hands tightened on the wheel. I could feel the road pulling me forward, like a giant invisible hand wrapped around the truck, dragging me deeper into its endless nightmare. I wanted to turn around. Wanted to stop, I wanted to wake up, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't driving the truck anymore. The truck was driving me, and it had no intention of letting me go. I don't know when I crossed into Dead Man's Pass. There was no clear line, no sudden jolt, no flashing lights, just the quiet realization that things had shifted, that the air was thicker, that the sky was darker, that the world itself had somehow grown older, more tired. The trees lining the road leaned in closer, their gnarled branches knitting together overhead to form a suffocating canopy. The headlights barely pierced the gloom. The yellow lines on the road had faded to ghostly smears, and the asphalt itself looked ancient, cracked and buckling like the dried skin of some enormous corpse. I loosened my grip on the wheel slightly, flexing my numb fingers. They hurt. The cold had seeped deep into the cab, into my bones. Every breath puffed out in thick white clouds that hung in the cab before fading away, only to be replaced by the next shivering exhale. The radio was dead, now just a soft hiss of static, like a whisper I couldn't quite make out. But every now and then, just at the edge of hearing, I thought I caught a word, a name. My name. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time. I focused. On the road ahead, trying to will away the creeping sense of doom gnawing at the edges of my mind. But the road had other plans. The first figure appeared just past the mile marker, if you could call it a mile marker anymore. It was more like a weathered gravestone, leaning drunkenly at the side of the road, with deep gouges running across its face. At its base stood a man, or something that looked like a man. He wore a trucker's jacket, old and stained, the patches worn to illegibility. His cap was pulled low, over his face, but even in the dim light I could see that his skin was wrong, too pale, too loose, hanging off his bones like wet paper. As I passed, he lifted one skeletal arm and pointed down the road, following me with a slow, creaking motion. No sound, no words, just that accusing finger, tracking me as I drove past. Tried not to look, tried to keep my eyes on the crumbling road, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced in the side mirror. He was gone. In his place, a dozen more figures lined the road, standing shoulder to shoulder like grim sentinels, all of them in trucker gear, denim jackets, grease-stained caps, heavy boots, all of them dead-eyed and grinning, all of them pointing. I pressed harder on the gas. The truck shuddered but obeyed, engine roaring against the heavy silence. The world continued to decay around me as I drove. The trees thinned, replaced by skeletal remains, dead stumps and splintered trunks that jutted from the ground like broken bones. The road narrowed until it was barely wide enough for the truck to fit. The air grew colder until frost crawled up the inside of the windshield. Like ghostly fingers, I had to lean forward to see, my breath fogging the glass. I didn't dare stop. Stopping meant death or worse. I thought about the stories old-timers used to tell at the truck stops late at night, about the black roads, highways that didn't exist on any map, places you could only find if you were lost, desperate, dying, places that didn't want you to leave once you found them. I used to think they were just that. Stories. Tall tales swapped over coffee and stale cigarettes to pass the lonely hours. But now, driving through the rotting corpse of dead, man's pass, I wasn't so sure. Maybe the stories had always been true. Maybe the road had just been waiting for me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw lights ahead, not the cold, flickering lights of some twisted gas station, not the pale, sickly glow of an abandoned diner. These lights were different. Warm, inviting. They pooled on the cracked asphalt like a golden promise. A sign loomed out of the dark. Welcome, traveler. Rest easy. I slowed instinctively, drawn in despite every screaming instinct. There was a motel there, or something wearing the shape of one. A long, low building with peeling paint and sagging balconies, its neon vacancy sign buzzing softly in the gloom. The parking lot was filled with trucks, old rusted rigs with flat tires and broken windows. None of them looked like they had moved in years, but still. The lights were on. Still. The door to the office stood open, a soft bell, chiming from within. Still, something inside called to me. I pulled into the lot, the tires crunching over gravel and broken glass. The truck coughed and died the moment I shifted into park. The headlights dimmed, then flickered out. The cab was plunged into darkness. I sat there for a long moment, hands still gripping the wheel, heart hammering against my ribs. Then slowly, mechanically, I opened the door and stepped down onto the cracked pavement. The air was thicker here, heavier. Each breath was a struggle. The world tilted slightly under my boots, like I was standing on the deck of a ship adrift at sea. The office door swung wider, the bell chiming again, louder this time. Sharper. I took a step forward, and another. The parking lot stretched impossibly long before me, trucks looming like silent witnesses on either side. I passed them without looking, without breathing. The office waited, a single pool of light in an endless sea of dark. When I reached the door, I hesitated. Something moved inside, a shadow flitting across the wall. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bell over the door let out a broken, distorted chime, like a song played backwards. The lobby was normal, ordinary even. A battered couch, a vending machine humming in the corner, a faded wallpaper pattern curling at the edges. Behind the front desk stood a man, or something like a man. He wore a threadbare suit and a smile that didn't reach. His eyes, those eyes were dead things, cold, flat and bottomless. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice dry and crumbling like old paper. "We've been expecting you." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. "I'm just looking for a way out," I croaked. The man's smile widened impossibly, splitting his face almost in half. "Aren't we all?" he said. I stood there, swaying slightly on my feet, the cold seeping into my bones. The man, or whatever he was, tilted his head, studying me with those empty eyes. He tapped a long grey finger against the ancient register on the counter. Dust puffed up with every tap. "Name?" he asked, voice rasping. I just need directions," I said, my voice sounding small in the stale air. "Everyone needs something," he replied, not unkindly. "Here, we ask for names first." I hesitated. There was a weight behind his request, a pressure that made my teeth click. Some part of me screamed not to answer, to lie, to run, but my lips moved on their own. "Tom," I said. I hadn't spoken my name aloud in hours, maybe days. It felt strange and thin on my tongue. The man smiled wider, if that was even possible, and scribbled something into the ledger with a bone-white pen. "Welcome, Tom," he said. "Room's ready. Been ready a long time." He slid a heavy iron key across the counter toward me. It was old, pitted with rust, a faded brass tag dangling from it that read, "Room 6. First door on your left," he said. "Stay as long as you like." "How much?" I asked, the words escaping before I could swallow them. He chuckled, a dry, papery sound. "Already paid," he said. I stared at him, at the key, at the peeling wallpaper, at the ancient vending machine blinking steadily in the corner. The room seemed to tilt and breathe around me. "I don't want to stay," I whispered. The man nodded solemnly. "No one ever does," he said. "I don't remember walking to the room. One minute I was standing at the counter. The next, I was standing in front of a battered wooden door, the key already, in my hand halfway inserted into the lock. The hallway was silent, not empty. I could feel things behind the other doors, things breathing, waiting, but silent. The wallpaper here was worse, peeling back in great strips, revealing rot blackened wood beneath. The carpet squished unpleasantly underfoot, damp and sour-smelling. The door in front of me, room 6, pulsed faintly like it had a heartbeat of its own. I turned the key. The lock clicked, loud and final. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was normal, almost painfully so. A queen-sized bed with a ratty floral bedspread, a cracked mirror above a particle board dresser, a heavy old television bolted to the stand. The bathroom door hung slightly ajar, darkness pooling beyond it. The window was shut tight, curtains drawn. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old cigarettes. For a moment, a blissful, terrifying moment, I almost believed I was just at some cheap, run-down motel off the highway, that none of the things I'd seen were real, that I could climb into bed, sleep for a few hours, and wake up to a world that made sense. But then I saw it. In the mirror. Not my reflection. Something standing behind me. A tall, thin figure. Its face was a blur of shifting shadows. Its mouth was a gaping black hole stretching wider and wider. It raised one long, spidery hand and pointed at me, the same way the truckers had, the same way all of them had. Pointing, accusing, condemning. Spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. The room was empty. Of course it was. The figure in the mirror grinned. Teeth impossibly long and thin, like needles. I stumbled back, bumping into the bed. The springs shrieked under my weight. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound like a gunshot in the stale air. The key, still in the lock, turned on its own. I was trapped. The television flickered to life without warning. Static hissing from the ancient speakers. The screen showed nothing at first, just grey, rippling snow, then an image slowly faded into view. A highway at night, the view from a dashboard camera. I knew it instantly. It was my truck. I watched myself driving through the mist, the twisted trees flashing by in the headlights. I watched, myself gripping the wheel, eyes wide and bloodshot. I watched myself mouth words I couldn't hear. Then the camera panned to the passenger seat. Something sat there, something tall and thin, wrapped in darkness. It turned slowly toward the camera, and the screen went black. The TV made a popping sound, and the smell of burning plastic filled the room. The mirror shattered. The door shook violently, rattling in its frame. The bed lurched under me, as if something underneath it was trying to claw its way out. I dropped to my knees, covering my head, heart hammering so hard it felt like it would crack my ribs. "This isn't real," I whispered. "This isn't real, this isn't real." The walls pulsed, the floor buckled, the entire room roared like a living thing, and then, as suddenly as it started, it all stopped. Silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the bed. The room was pristine. No broken mirror, no smell of burning, no shattered TV, just a cheap motel room humming quietly under the flickering fluorescent lights. The window curtains stirred slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. I stood up on shaky legs. The door was unlocked, standing slightly open. The hallway beyond was dark, endless. I knew I couldn't stay here. Knew I couldn't trust anything in this place. Knew I had to keep moving. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing silently behind me. The corridor stretched out before me, longer than it had any right to be. Doors lined the walls, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, each identical, each humming faintly with a terrible life of its own. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know if there even was a way out. All I knew was that if I stopped, if I hesitated, the hallway would close around me. The doors would open, and whatever lived behind them would take me. I walked, and walked, and walked. The hallway stretched on forever, bending and twisting subtly, almost like it was breathing around me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, flickering shadows that moved just a half-second slower than I did. Every few steps I passed another door, identical brass numbers, identical peeling paint, identical hum of something terrible waiting just beyond the threshold. I didn't touch them. I didn't even look at them for too long. I knew that, if I let my gaze linger, if I so much as brushed my fingers against one of those handles, the door would swing open, and I wouldn't be able to leave. The air grew heavier with every step. Each breath was like dragging wet concrete into my lungs. The carpet beneath my boots squelched unpleasantly, growing wetter, stickier. I didn't want to think about what I was walking on. I didn't want to think about the faint crimson stains blooming around my footprints. I just kept going, kept walking. Because somewhere ahead, far, far ahead, I thought I saw a light, a different light. Not the sickly buzzing overhead fluorescence, not the dim flickering motel bulbs. No, this light was natural. Moonlight, maybe. Soft, silver, cool against the oppressive gloom. I fixed my eyes on it and forced my legs to move faster. As I drew closer, I realized the hallway was ending. The walls fell away. The ceiling opened up, and I found myself standing at the edge of a vast open highway, the same broken, crumbling asphalt from before, the same ancient, splintering trees lining the sides. But above me the sky was open. The stars were wrong, too big, too close, burning coldly against a velvet black void. But they were stars nonetheless. And the moon. The moon was enormous, hanging low on the horizon like a corpse on a noose. It bled silver light across the landscape, painting everything in sharp, dreamlike relief. I stumbled forward onto the highway. The air here was cleaner somehow, though. It carried the faint coppery tang of blood. I looked down the road. Stretching into the endless dark was a convoy of trucks, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all abandoned, all rusted husks with shattered windows and sagging tires, each one sitting at strange angles, as if the drivers had simply vanished mid-journey, leaving the rigs to drift to a halt wherever they pleased. The road was choked with them, a graveyard of machines, and somewhere, deep within that graveyard, I could hear engines rumbling. Alive, waiting. I picked my way through the wreckage. The trucks loomed over me like broken monuments. Their cabins were twisted and gaping, doors hanging ajar. Sometimes I caught glimpses of things inside, glimpses I quickly looked away from, hands gripping steering wheels long after they should have rotted away, faces pressed against windshields, mouths frozen in eternal screams. Shadows, flitting across empty cabs, moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm. I walked faster. Every so often, headlights would flicker to life on one of the trucks. Not a steady glow. No, these lights blinked on and off like dying eyes, casting strobing, nightmarish shadows across the road. Each time I caught flashes of movement, figures darting between the rigs, thin, tall figures with arms too long and legs that bent the wrong way. They watched me, followed me, but never got too close. Not yet. Eventually, I found my truck. It sat at the center of a crossroads where the abandoned highway split in 4 directions, each path vanishing into different pockets of darkness. My rig looked just as I remembered it, battered, sure, but solid, reliable. Lifeline. The cab door was ajar, the keys still dangling from the ignition. As I approached, I noticed something scratched into the driver's side door. Deep gouges, as if made by long, clawed fingers. One word: run. I didn't hesitate. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door behind me. The seat was cold but familiar. The dashboard lights flickered weakly to life. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared awake. I almost cried at the sound. Home, safety, sanity. Gripped the wheel and stared out at the 4 branching roads. Which way? Each path looked identical, crumbling, dark, endless. But one, the road to the left, seemed lighter. The darkness there was thinner, stretched, not welcoming exactly, but less oppressive. I threw the rig into gear and turned the wheel. Hard. The tires screeched against the cracked asphalt as I lurched forward, metal groaning under the strain. The road swallowed me whole. For a long time, it was just the hum of the engine and the hollow moan of the wind. The trucks and the twisted trees fell away behind me, swallowed by the dark. The road narrowed and widened again, like a living thing breathing. Sometimes I passed things on the shoulder, things I refused to look at directly. Bodies or statues or something between the two, frozen mid-scream, mid-run, mid-collapse, each one facing away from the road, each one reaching towards something unseen. The radio crackled to life. Again static at first, then voices, soft and broken like whispers on the edge of hearing. They spoke my name, over and over. Tom, Tom, you shouldn't have come here. Tom, you can't leave. Tom, you were always meant to stay. I snapped the radio off, heart hammering, but the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, filling the cab, bleeding from the very walls. I pressed harder on the gas. The speedometer needle quivered at 90, 95. 100 minampes. The road blurred under the wheels, but no matter how fast I went, the darkness pressed in closer. And still, ahead, the thin stretch of lighter darkness called to me. I just had to reach it. I just had to get there. I don't know how. Long I drove, hours, days, maybe years. Time didn't mean anything here, only motion, only escape. But eventually, blessedly, I saw something ahead. Lights. Real lights. A gas station. Old. Battered, barely clinging to life, but real. A single island of brightness in the endless dark. A place to rest. A place to breathe. A place to figure out where the hell I was. I pulled into the lot, tires skidding across cracked concrete. The engine coughed and sputtered, then fell silent. The gas pumps were ancient, their prices frozen decades ago. The windows of the building were fogged and cracked. A flickering neon sign buzzed overhead. Last stop, fuel and food. Something about the name made my stomach twist, but I was too tired to care. I climbed out of the truck, boots crunching over broken glass and gravel. The gas station door swung open with a squeal, the bell overhead letting out a broken, warbling jingle. I stepped inside, and the world shifted again. The air inside the gas station was thick, almost syrupy. It clung to my skin, my clothes, my lungs. Dim yellow lights buzzed overhead, swinging slightly, casting long, oily shadows across the stained linoleum floor. The place looked abandoned at first glance. Shelves stood half empty, products faded and crumbling. The freezers along the back wall gaped open, leaking fog that pooled on the floor like smoke. Somewhere deeper inside, a slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip echoed endlessly. I moved cautiously past the checkout counter, where a register sat covered in a thick layer of dust. A cracked radio perched nearby, faintly humming static. I almost turned around, almost fled. But then I saw the clerk. He stood, at the end of the aisle, stock still, face pale, eyes wide, mouth hanging open, lips cracked and bleeding. He wore a filthy red vest with a name tag that simply said, Ed. He wasn't breathing, wasn't blinking, wasn't even swaying like a normal person would after standing that long. He just existed, fixed to the floor like a mannequin. I took a slow step toward him. Hey man, I croaked, my voice sounding foreign. Even to my own ears. You okay? No response. Not even a twitch. I edged closer, my boots making soft, sticky noises against the floor. When I was just a few feet away, I saw that Ed's skin wasn't pale. It was translucent. I could see the blue-black ropes of veins beneath it pulsing faintly. And his eyes, they weren't just wide, they were completely blank. All iris and pupil drained away into a milky nothing. I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs, and as I did, Ed moved. Not naturally, not like a person moves. He jerked. His head snapped sideways at an impossible angle, cracking audibly. His mouth opened wider, far wider, splitting the corners of his lips, and from deep within him came a low, bubbling noise. Not a voice, not a word, just a sound, wet, hungry, inviting. I didn't wait. I bolted for the freezer section, my boots skidding across the slick floor. The air back here was colder, sharp enough to burn my skin. But it was real. It was something I could cling to. The freezers still oozed mist, doors hanging open like mouths gasping for breath. Inside, the shelves were packed with things that might have once been food. Packages of meat squirmed faintly under their plastic wrappings. Bags of ice pulsated slowly, breathing in and out. Bottles of soda shifted, the liquid inside swirling in slow, deliberate circles. I pressed myself against one of the freezer doors, trying to catch my breath, trying to think, trying to figure out my next move. Behind me, Ed's wet, dragging footsteps echoed across the floor. He was following, slowly, relentlessly. I had to find a way out. The front door was behind him. No good. The windows were fogged and barred. No good. There had to be a back door. Somewhere. Somewhere. Beyond the freezers. I shoved past the last aisle, knocking over a display of ancient snack cakes that exploded into a cloud of mold and dust. There, tucked behind a towering rack of water-damaged magazines, was a door, rusty, cracked, but unmistakably an exit. I sprinted toward it, heart hammering. Fingers closed around the icy metal handle and yanked. It didn't budge. Locked. Of course it was locked. Behind me, Ed's footsteps grew louder, faster. I spun, looking wildly around for something, anything, to break the door open. My eyes landed on a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall nearby. I lunged for it, yanking it free with a screech of bending metal. Ed rounded the corner as I hefted the heavy extinguisher over my shoulder. He was closer now, much closer. Close enough that I could see the thin worms writhing just beneath his translucent skin. Close enough to smell the rotting meat stink pouring off him. Close enough to see his tongue, long, black, serpentine, lolling from his broken jaw. I screamed, "Hi, raw animal," and swung the extinguisher with all my strength. The metal crunched against Ed's face with a wet, splattering sound. He staggered back but didn't fall, didn't even seem hurt, just amused. If he could feel amusement. His ruined face twisted into something that might have been a smile full of blackened teeth and writhing things that weren't quite maggots. I didn't wait to see what he did next. Turned and smashed the fire extinguisher against the back door's handle. Once, twice, 3 times. The lock snapped with a screech of tortured metal. The door swung outward, and I hurled myself into the night. Outside, the world was worse. The sky above the gas station was wrong. The stars wheeled and twisted, forming shapes I didn't want to recognize. The moon was gone, swallowed by a roiling mass of black clouds that pulsed like a living heart. The landscape had changed. No more road, no more trees. Just a flat, endless plain of ash, stretching out in every direction. And in the distance, barely visible through the swirling fog, dozens of figures moved. Tall, thin, twisting in the mist, coming toward. Me, I didn't know what they were, didn't want to know. All I knew was that I had to move. I turned, expecting to see the gas station behind me, but it was gone, swallowed whole by the fog, leaving me alone, utterly alone, in the ash, in the dark, with them. I started walking, not because I thought I could escape, not because I thought there was somewhere safe, but because standing still meant death, or something worse. The ground crunched softly under my boots, the ash clinging to me like hungry fingers. The air was thick and oily, tasting of burnt rubber and old blood. The figures in the distance grew clearer as I moved. They weren't walking. They weren't running. They were gliding. Their feet never touching the ground, their arms swaying slowly, rhythmically, each one crowned by a shifting mass of shadow where a head should be, and all of them, every single one, pointed at me, just like the others, just like before, accusing, condemning, claiming. I didn't stop, couldn't stop. I kept, my eyes down, fixed on the ground in front of me. Step, 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 breath hitching, skin crawling, heart hammering against my ribs. The fog thickened, coiling around me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Stay with us. You belong here. This is your home now. I squeezed my eyes shut and kept moving. The ground sloped downward, subtly at first, then more steeply. I stumbled, nearly falling, catching myself on trembling knees. When I opened my eyes again, I saw it. A tunnel, huge, yawning, carved into the ground like a gaping throat. The mist poured into it like blood down a drain. The figures floated at its edges, watching, waiting, inviting. I didn't want to go down there. Every cell in my body screamed to turn back, but there was nowhere else. No road, no sky, no truck, only the tunnel, only forward. I took one last shuddering breath and stepped into the dark. The air inside the tunnel was colder, not the biting, sharp cold of winter. No, this was a deep, soaking cold, the kind that slid under your skin, filled your bones, and made them ache. The walls were rough stone, wet and pulsing faintly like something alive. My footsteps echoed in the endless dark, but the sound was wrong, muffled, almost swallowed by the tunnel itself. I kept moving. There was no other choice. Ahead of me, the darkness pressed in heavier, thicker. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was something real, something alive, a presence watching me, breathing with me, waiting. I don't know how long I walked. Time slipped away the moment I stepped into the tunnel. Minutes, hours, days. It didn't matter. There was only the steady beat of my boots on the slick stone floor and the wet sucking noises as I dragged myself deeper into the earth. Occasionally I passed doorways cut into the walls, each one barely visible. Just a shadowy rectangle set into the rock. I didn't look into them, I didn't dare, but sometimes from the corners of my eyes I saw things lurking in those doorways. Shapes, hands, faces, watching, always watching. Eventually, the tunnel began to change. The walls shifted from stone to metal, rusted, groaning sheets bolted together haphazardly. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping oily water onto the floor. The air grew fouler, carrying the stink of burning hair and rotted meat. Ahead, I saw a faint flickering light. I stumbled toward it. Blinking against the stinging fog, the tunnel opened into a vast underground garage. Rows upon rows of trucks sat abandoned in the gloom. Their headlights flickered weakly, casting long, broken shadows across the cracked concrete. Some of the trucks were normal, others weren't. Their frames twisted and fused with the floor, their cabs warped into grotesque shapes, almost organic. Pulsing, breathing, waiting. In the center of the garage stood a figure, tall, thin, draped in tattered, oil-soaked overalls, a cracked trucker's cap perched atop its head, shadowing its face. In its hands, it held a rusted lantern that spat out sickly green light. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me. I stopped at the edge of the garage, heart hammering, unsure whether to approach or run. The figure raised its free hand, a slow, deliberate motion. It pointed, not at me, but at a truck near the far wall. My truck. Somehow, impossibly, it was my rig. Same dents, same faded paint, same cracked windshield. It sat there, humming softly, almost eagerly, waiting for me. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me that this was a trap, that nothing good waited inside that cab, but I had no other choice. Not here, not now. I took a step forward, then another. The figure didn't move, didn't follow, just watched. As I crossed the garage, I passed other trucks. Each one whispered as I moved by, low, garbled voices seeping from their broken radios, snatches of conversations, screams, laughter, crying, warnings. I didn't listen. I couldn't afford to listen. I kept my eyes locked on my rig, forcing one foot in front of the other. When I finally reached it, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely grasp the handle. The door swung open with a soft groan. The cab was dark inside, but it smelled right. Familiar. Home. I climbed in and pulled the door shut behind me. The moment it clicked shut, the world outside vanished, gone, swallowed by blackness. I sat in silence, waiting, listening. The dashboard lights blinked on, casting a faint orange glow across the cab. The engine rumbled to life, deep and steady, vibrating through the seat and floor. I gripped the wheel, my palms were slick with sweat. The radio crackled and a voice on my voice and spoke from the speakers. "Keep going, Tom. Don't look back. Whatever happens, don't stop." Before I could react, the truck lurched forward, tires squealing against unseen pavement. I wasn't pressing the gas. I wasn't steering. The rig moved on its own, hurtling through the black void. The windshield showed nothing. No road, no sky, no stars, just endless, devouring dark. But still we drove, faster and faster, deeper and deeper, toward something, toward some place. Shapes began to form in the dark, flickering glimpses at first. Telephone poles, fences, billboards with peeling paint that seemed to twist into words I couldn't understand. A gas station with boarded-up windows, a diner whose neon sign buzzed weakly. Always open. And figures, always the figures, standing at the sides of the road, watching, waiting. Some of them held lanterns, some held signs, some simply stood there, arms outstretched, as if begging for me to stop. But I didn't. I couldn't. The truck wouldn't let me. The road twisted and bent, looping back on itself, spiraling downward into deeper darkness. The scenery grew stranger, more broken. Streetlights hanging from invisible threads, cars stacked like cans along the roadside, their occupants frozen inside like dolls. Road signs written in languages that hurt to look at. The voices on the radio grew louder, angrier, more desperate. "Turn back. Stop the truck. Get out before it's too late." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The words wormed their way inside my head, scratching and clawing, tearing. The dashboard clock spun wildly, hands blurring into meaningless circles. The skiing fuel gauge dipped lower, lower, lower. I slammed my fists against the steering wheel. "Where am I going?" I screamed into the dark. The radio answered in a voice that wasn't mine. Not anymore. "Home?" The word hit me like a hammer blow. Home. But what was home now? This endless road, this living nightmare? Or something waiting even deeper, even darker? Something I wasn't meant to remember? Something I wasn't meant to escape? I didn't. No. All I knew was that the truck was driving itself straight into the heart of it, and there was no way out. The truck's tires thumped rhythmically against the broken road. Each bump felt almost alive, like the heartbeat of some massive thing slumbering beneath the highway. Outside the windows, the world unraveled even further. Buildings sagged inward, their walls breathing slowly like sleeping beasts. Telephone wires dangled and twisted, forming nooses that swung gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. Pale shapes moved in the fields, too large to be human, too fast to be anything natural. And, above it all, the sky had turned into something else, a roiling, churning mass of grey and purple, broken only by the occasional violent streak of black lightning. It didn't flash. It crawled, like veins across the heavens. I kept both hands locked on the steering wheel, even though I wasn't steering anymore. The truck guided itself down the endless, crumbling highway, faster and faster. My knuckles turned white from the strain. The radio continued its low, staticky chant. Whispers now. No words I could understand, but they made my skin crawl all the same. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of the passengers. They sat in the corner of my vision, in the empty seat beside me, in the sleeper cab behind. Figures, shifting, changing. 1 second, a man in a blood-soaked suit. The next, a woman with hollow black pits for eyes. Then a child, skin grey and tight over jutting bones, smiling wide enough to tear its cheeks. Every time I looked directly at them, they vanished, but I could still hear them breathing, still smell them, like burnt hair and old pennies. I don't know how long I drove like that. Minutes. Hours. Days. The clock on the dashboard had melted, the numbers dripping down the plastic like wax. I started losing pieces of time. One moment I was gripping the wheel, the next I was 20 miles down the road, the scenery even worse, my knuckles bleeding from holding on too tight. And the passengers, they were getting bolder. They didn't vanish as quickly anymore when I turned my head. Sometimes I caught a full glimpse. A twisted old man in a sheriff's uniform with a noose around his neck. A woman in a tattered diner uniform, half of her face a blackened ruin. A little girl in a communion dress clutching a headless teddy bear. They stared at me with empty, waiting eyes. At one point, the truck shuddered, veered, almost as if something heavy had climbed onto the trailer behind me. The rear-view mirrors, which had been dead black for hours, flickered to life. I risked a glance. Shapes, climbing, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scrabbling over the trailer, slithering along the roof. Long, boneless limbs, grinning, lipless mouths, hooked fingers tapping against the metal. I tore my eyes away, kept them locked on the broken ribbon of road stretching into forever. If I looked too long, I knew they'd find a way inside. Maybe they already had. Maybe they were already whispering in my ears, telling me to let go of the wheel, to fall asleep, to surrender. The fuel gauge flickered wildly, empty, full, empty again, meaningless. But still, the truck kept going, driven by something older and hungrier than gasoline. Ahead, a shape began to form, out of the mist, huge, monolithic, a building, maybe a station, or a temple, or a mausoleum. I couldn't tell. The architecture was all wrong, angles that didn't make sense, towers that seemed to bend away from each other and yet touch at the tips. Signs, barely legible, flickered above a yawning entrance. Wayfarer's Rest, last stop, no exit. The truck didn't slow down, didn't even hesitate. It barreled straight toward the entrance, the engine howling louder than I thought possible. The dark mouth of the building yawned wider and swallowed me whole. Inside, there was no road, no sky, no world at all, just blackness, and a soft, almost tender hum vibrating through the truck's frame. It felt welcoming, like the lullaby of some great beast, crooning to me as it coiled tighter. The truck finally rolled to a stop. The engine died with a sigh, and for the first time since I entered the tunnel, there was silence. Thick, complete, smothering. I sat there, frozen, unsure what to do. The figures were still in the cab with me, still breathing, still watching, but they didn't move, not yet. The door beside me creaked open, even though I hadn't touched the handle. Beyond it, only darkness waited. It wasn't empty, I could feel it, alive, quivering, hungry. Something shifted in the dark, massive and slow. The smell of wet earth and old stone filled the cab. And then, something spoke, not out loud. Inside my mind, a voice like breaking rocks and rushing water. "Come home, Tom. You've been gone too long." I wanted to scream, wanted to fight. But I couldn't move. My body betrayed me, unbuckling the seatbelt, swinging. My legs out of the cab. I stepped down onto nothing. And yet I stood, supported by something unseen, or maybe by nothing at all. The truck's headlights flickered one last time, and then went out, leaving me alone in the endless dark. I walked forward, steps slow and deliberate. The darkness curled around me like smoke, whispering, laughing, weeping. Memories flickered through the blackness, a childhood birthday party, a first kiss under a flickering streetlight, a bar fight that ended with me. Bleeding on the pavement, and always, always the road, stretching out behind every memory, waiting, calling, trapping. I realized in that moment that I had never really left the road, not once. Not truly. It had been winding through every moment of my life, unseen but inevitable, leading me here, leading me home. Ahead, a faint light appeared, pale, sickly, like the light of a dying star. It pulsed, slowly drawing me closer. As I approached, I saw that it wasn't a star, it was a sign, hanging crookedly from a rusted post. The letters were worn, almost illegible, but I could just make them out. "Welcome to Dead Mile." Beneath it, another smaller. Sign swayed in an unseen breeze. Truckers only. No passengers. I stood there staring up at the signs, heart thundering in my ears. Somewhere behind me, the truck's horn blared, a long, mournful sound, calling me back, warning me, begging me, but it was too late. I had arrived, and Dead Mile had been waiting a very long time. I took a few trembling steps forward. The ground beneath me wasn't concrete, not asphalt. It was something else, something that flexed and shifted subtly underfoot, like walking across the back of something huge and breathing. The light from the sign barely pierced the gloom. Beyond it, I could just make out shapes, the skeletal remains of other trucks, some upright, some tipped onto their sides. Their metal frames twisted and rusted into unnatural forms. Some were still idling, coughing black smoke into the heavy air. Others sat silent, half swallowed by the ground itself, like the road had grown hungry and decided to feast. The deeper I moved into Dead Mile, the more wrong everything felt. The air vibrated faintly, almost musical, a distant hum like 1,000 diesel engines idling just beyond hearing. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the road didn't allow turning. Back, not anymore, up ahead. I spotted figures, people maybe. Truckers, it seemed at first glance. But as I drew closer, the details sharpened, and the truth sank cold and heavy into my gut. Their faces were wrong, too stretched, too thin, eyes sunken deep into hollow sockets. Some had no eyes at all, just gaping, weeping holes. Their uniforms were tattered remnants of every era, some in crisp modern jackets, others in uniforms that looked a century old. One man wore a wide-brimmed hat caked with dust and blood, his face hidden by a cracked leather mask stitched crudely across his mouth. Another dragged a broken CB radio by a length of chain, the device sparking weakly as he walked. They moved in slow circles, shuffling around invisible routes, repeating patterns that had long since worn deep grooves into the shifting ground, like they were trapped on invisible highways, endlessly driving, loops they could never finish. And when they sensed me, when their hollow gazes turned my way, I understood something else. They weren't angry. They weren't welcoming. They were envious. A voice crackled from nowhere, an old, dry voice coughing and wheezing through static. "So you're new," it said. I spun around, searching for the source. A small, cracked intercom was mounted to a crooked pole by the side of the road. The speaker buzzed, coughing more words into the heavy air. "Don't stop. Don't talk to them. Don't let 'em ride with you. They ain't passengers no more." The intercom whined sharply and went dead, falling silent as suddenly as it had come alive. I stood there a moment longer, breathing hard, my hands trembling. The wandering figures kept their distance, for now, but I could feel their attention like a weight pressing against my skull. They knew I was still free, still whole, still driving, and they hated me for it. Something massive groaned beneath the ground. The earth shivered, sending ripples through the darkened landscape. A low rumbling roar rose up, vibrating through the soles of my boots and into my bones. Somewhere far off in the blackness, headlights flared, blinding, distant. A truck, a massive one, barreling straight toward me. Its horn screamed, a sound like tearing metal and the howling of 1,000 wolves. I turned and ran, heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't know where I was going. The road bent and twisted wildly, splitting off into 1,000 branching paths, none of them straight, none of them safe. The headlights grew larger, brighter, impossibly fast. The thing behind the lights wasn't a truck. Not really. It was a stitched-together monstrosity of steel and flesh, its engine snarling like a rabid animal. The ground shook with each pounding rotation of its massive, blood-smeared tires. It was hunting me. It was hunting anyone foolish enough to still be moving. I dove behind the wreckage of an old rig, barely avoiding the screaming rush of the beast truck as it tore past. The heat from its engine washed over me, searing and oily. I caught a glimpse of the driver as it passed. If you could call it a driver, it was something in the rough shape of a man, but grotesquely swollen and fused to the seat, hundreds of wires and fuel lines piercing its bloated flesh. Its mouth hung open in a soundless wail, and its eyes were mirrors, reflecting endless roads stretching into forever. The truck vanished into the distance, tires shrieking, smoke pouring from its exhaust like black blood. I stayed hidden, gasping, until the trembling ground began to still. The wandering figures kept shuffling, undisturbed. Maybe they were used to it. Maybe they knew better than to run. Eventually, I pulled myself up, heart still rattling in my chest. I had to find my rig. It was my only way out, if there even was a way out. But first I needed to survive Dead Mile. I picked a direction at random, they all seemed equally wrong, and started walking. The broken highway stretched out before me, glittering faintly with shattered glass and bits of twisted chrome. Every so often I passed another trucker frozen mid-shuffle, their hollow eyes tracking me with aching slowness. Some murmured to themselves, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Others simply stared, and above it all, in the sky that wasn't a sky, thin, black shapes wheeled and circled, drifting lower with each passing moment. Hunters, waiting, choosing. I kept my head down and my feet moving, because here, stopping was the same as dying, and dying was only the beginning. The road sloped downward, subtly at first, then steeper, pulling me deeper into the bowels of Dead Mile. The broken, rotted landscape fell away around me, replaced by something worse. Endless rows of truck stops and diners, all dark, all abandoned. Some still flickered weakly, signs buzzing broken promises into the choking air. Hot coffee, rooms available, fresh pie. The windows were smeared with something thick and dark, shapes pressed against the glass from the inside. Hands, faces. Not alive, not anymore. They watched me pass with hungry, mournful eyes. Ahead, a single gas station stood lit, its pumps flickering, pale green under buzzing floodlights. It looked almost normal. Almost. But as I drew closer, I saw the truth. The attendants weren't human. Not anymore. Their skin sagged in heavy folds, blackened and cracked like burnt paper. Their mouths hung slack, leaking thick, dark fluids that hissed when it touched the ground. One of them. Once, a young woman, her name tag still barely readable, lifted a skeletal hand and waved lazily at me as I approached. Her mouth moved in slow, jerking motions. "Fill her up," she rasped. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The others chuckled, had a horrible broken sound, and shuffled closer. Their hands groped the air, reaching for me. I bolted, ran past the pumps, past the station, back, onto the crumbling road. Their laughter followed me, low and thick and sticky. But they didn't pursue. Maybe they couldn't leave the station. Maybe they were bound there, cursed to spend eternity offering services no one could ever accept. It didn't matter. I was moving again, and moving meant surviving. For now. The road stretched out ahead, buckling and splitting, leading deeper into the nightmare. And somewhere out there in the endless dark, my truck was waiting, still humming, still loyal, still my only chance at escaping the hungry heart of Dead Mile. I ran without thinking. I couldn't feel the ground beneath my boots anymore, just the air, thick, wet and oppressive, closing in around me. I could still hear the horn, that shrill, unbearable sound of the truck's engine revving up, its horn calling through the darkness like a warning. Or a summons. I didn't know which. I couldn't make myself turn around. My legs moved faster, my breath ragged and uneven. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the road itself was pulling me back, trying to keep me from escaping. I stumbled. Over something soft. A body, maybe. But I didn't dare stop to look. I pushed forward, heart racing, nearly choking on the air. The road stretched on, but there was no sign of the horizon. No end, just that endless, oppressive highway. Rounded a bend, or was it another loop? I couldn't tell anymore. I'd been running for what felt like hours, but the world around me seemed unchanged. Suddenly something flashed in the distance. A light, distant but warm, like the flickering glow of a campfire. A gas station. I couldn't stop myself from running toward it. My mind screamed at me to find shelter, to stop and hide, to make the light stop taunting me with the illusion of safety. As I approached, the light grew more real. The smell of diesel and oil hung thick in the air, mingling with a strange, almost sweet scent I couldn't place. But then I saw it, The building was massive, a truck stop like none I'd ever seen before. The lights were blinding, neon signs buzzed with life, their colors too vibrant against the suffocating darkness that surrounded the place. A sign loomed above the entrance, its letters glowing faintly. Welcome to the end of the road. It felt wrong, like it had been there forever. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the building. The air felt colder here. The wind seemed to whip at my skin like invisible hands. I didn't want to go inside, but I had no choice. I crossed the threshold, stepping into the building with the slow inevitability of a man walking to his own death. Inside, the place was filled with an eerie, half-lit glow. The floors were covered in cracked tiles, some of them stained with dark, drying splotches that looked like they had been there for years. The walls were lined with old, faded pictures of trucks, some of them so old that the images seemed to flicker as I passed by, as if the very memories of the place were being replayed in real time, and each second distorted a little more. The scent of food lingered in the air, but it was off, stale. Something about it made my stomach churn. At the counter there was a man. He looked normal enough at first glance. Dark hair, a weathered face, his jacket patched with the logos of various trucking companies. But as I stepped closer, I noticed the details that didn't quite add up. His eyes were too wide, too shiny. They gleamed with an unnatural intensity, like headlights cutting through the night. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth but hollow, like it didn't quite belong to him. I shook my head, unable to speak. Something in my gut told me that I shouldn't trust him, that I should turn around, leave, and never look back. But my legs wouldn't obey. I walked up to the counter, drawn like a moth to a flame. The man's smile never wavered. It was warm, too welcoming, like he was trying to lure me in. "You've been out there a long time," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "You must be hungry, or maybe you need a place to rest." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The silence in the room seemed to grow, expanding, filling the air until it was suffocating. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. His hand reached out across the counter, too slowly, like he was savoring the moment. "I can help you," he said, his voice dropping lower, almost a whisper. "All you need to do is ask." I took a step back, my body trembling. I wanted to run. I had to run. But my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. A soft laugh escaped his lips, and I realized with a cold shock that he had been watching me for far longer than I'd thought. The room around me shifted. The shadows stretched longer. I blinked, and suddenly the walls were different. The pictures of trucks had vanished, replaced by strange symbols, barely visible beneath the peeling wallpaper. Everything was wrong. And then it hit me. I wasn't in a truck stop anymore. I wasn't in Dead Mile anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere deeper. Something twisted in the back of my mind, urging me to leave. I turned around quickly, but the door had disappeared. The exit was gone, and the man's laugh grew louder. I wasn't alone. Suddenly figures appeared in the corners of the room, people, truckers, but twisted. Their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow, empty. They were watching me, waiting. Some were slouched against the walls, others sitting at tables. Some had their hands folded neatly in their laps. Others had strange, monstrous limbs. Arms, too long, hands clawed and dripping something that resembled oil. I took a step back, panic surging through me. But no matter which direction I looked, there was no way out. The walls seemed to breathe. The air was thick with whispers, muffled, unintelligible. "Don't worry, stranger," the man's voice echoed behind me. "We're all just waiting. Just like you. Waiting for the road to take us, for the truck to find us, for the end." I stumbled forward, every instinct screaming at me to escape, to break free of this twisted nightmare. But there was no escape. Not from Dead Mile, not from the road, and then it happened. The ground beneath my feet shook. The air grew colder, and the ceiling above cracked open, a blinding light spilling down in a single jagged beam. The truck, the same one I had seen earlier, appeared in the distance. The massive black rig, its headlights blinding and sharp, bore down on the building, coming closer with a sickening inevitability. Its horn blared again, louder this time. Closer. A voice from the intercom crackled to life, raspy and urgent. It's time. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't have to know. The truck was here, and soon there would be nothing left of me. I turned around to face the figures, the truckers who were now moving toward me, their movements slow, deliberate. They weren't alive. They weren't dead either. They were waiting for me to make the final step. I closed my eyes. The road was waiting. The truck was waiting, and Dead Mile would never let me go. The truck's headlights grew brighter, glaring through the cracks in the walls. I could feel the vibration of its engine, a low hum that seemed to rattle my bones. I couldn't breathe. The shadows in the room stretched impossibly long, consuming everything they touched, until the floor beneath me was swallowed whole, leaving me standing in a sea of darkness. I could still hear the figures moving behind me. The truckers. They were closer now, their eyes gleaming like the polished chrome of the truck, but there was no escape, no way to outrun what was coming. I stumbled backward, my heart racing in my chest, my skin slick with sweat. The light from the truck illuminated everything. The twisted faces of the truckers, their eyes wide and unblinking, their expressions frozen in some eternal moment of waiting. Waiting for the road to call them, waiting for the truck to take them away. A hand brushed against my arm, cold and clammy. I spun around, my body shaking violently. It was the man from the counter. His smile had stretched into something grotesque. His teeth were too sharp, his skin too pale, but his eyes, they were the worst, they were dark, bottomless pits, as though nothing of him remained but the echo of what had been. "You're not leaving, stranger," he whispered, his breath cold, against my ear. "None of us leave. The road owns us, the truck owns us." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was like the air had been stolen from my lungs, leaving me gasping for breath. My legs felt like they were sinking into the floor, heavy and useless. The truck's engine roared again, the sound deafening, rattling my teeth in my skull. It was closer now, just outside the building. Its presence pressing in on me from all sides. I had to get out. I didn't know how, but I had to. I shoved the man away from me, stumbling toward the back door that had appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't the same door I had entered through. No, this was something different, darker, older. Like it had always been there, hidden in the depths of the building. I grabbed the handle, my hands slick with sweat, and threw it open. The moment I stepped outside, I was hit by the cold. A biting wind howled through the air, carrying with it the scent of diesel and something rotting, something dead. I barely registered the fact that I was outside. My eyes were locked on the truck, the massive black rig parked just a few feet from me, its engine still rumbling in the night. And then I saw it. A figure stood in front of the truck, silhouetted by the blinding headlights. A tall, thin shape, wrapped in a long tattered coat that fluttered in the wind. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me. Cold, unfeeling. It was waiting for me. I had no choice but to move forward. I took a step, then another, and another. Each step felt like it took me further from the world I knew, closer to something darker, something older. I didn't want to look back, but the compulsion was too strong. I turned. The man from the counter was standing in the doorway, smiling, and the truckers were there too, all of them, their eyes fixed on me. "You can't escape," they all whispered. In unison. "The road doesn't let go." I shook my head, panic clawing at my chest. The truck's engine roared again, louder now, the sound vibrating through my bones. The figure in front of the truck stepped forward, its head tilting slightly, as if it were studying me. The darkness that clung to it was unnatural. Like it was a part of the very night itself. I couldn't breathe. My legs were heavy, my head was spinning. I had no choice now. The road had already claimed me. The figure reached out, its hand like a shadow, long and impossibly thin. It brushed against my arm, sending a cold shiver through my entire body. And then it spoke. "It's time, driver." The words sent a jolt of terror through me, but they didn't register at first. I couldn't process what was happening, what this thing was. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could understand. I stepped back, my mind screaming to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was trapped in its gaze, locked in place as if the road itself had frozen me. The figure reached for me again, this time with both hands. Its fingers stretched, elongated like twisted branches reaching for the sky. The moment they touched my skin, I felt an ice-cold jolt surge through me, paralyzing me